This episode is proudly supported by Pepe Sayer Australian Cultured Butter.
At Pepe Sayer, we focus on quality. So if someone comes into your restaurant and they see you're using Pepe Sayer, they know immediately that that is a quality product you've got in front of you on the table. And that comes from a decade of just doing quality butter day after day.
For more information, go to pepesayer.com.au.
You know, small is the new big. That's what I keep saying to the guys at work. Small is the new big, because the cost of opening those doors are now at a point where you need to be really busy for those times that the doors are open.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Creating your own restaurant, COVID aside, has its challenges. Years of dreaming, creating and overcoming many obstacles. And then for some, to have something like a pandemic come along just as you prepare to swing the doors open has made the endeavour even more challenging. What's it been like for businesses just getting started? Sean Flannagan is the owner of Wildgrain on the Mornington Peninsula in Victoria. Sean, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to have you on the show. What's it like in the Mornington Peninsula at the moment?
We're obviously in the deep darks of winter at the moment, and just coming out of that. And I think what's exciting is gearing up for hopefully what will be a far better summer than last summer. Coming out of lockdown 7, etc., was not the nicest time of the year and time to be gearing up for a restaurant. But I'm quite looking forward to opening, should we say, what's coming in the next couple of months. I think it'll be exciting. It really will, yeah.
Well, there's certainly a very different experience we're all having because, you know, the lockdowns and stuff seem to be a thing of the past, and we're sort of moving forward. Is there a bit of optimism and change that you're looking forward to over this summer?
Oh, look, absolutely. Obviously, when you try and, obviously I'm from overseas, I'm from Ireland, and, you're speaking to people at home all the time. And when you do, you're halfway through a conversation and you're saying, so after lockdown 7, and they're kind of going, you actually had 7 lockdowns. And I said, yeah. And having to deal with the open, the close, the open, close, the open, the close. And then the elements of what we went through with reserved seating and limited numbers and limited everything. I feel as if the handcuffs have been taken off us now and we're able to go, all right, lads, off we go now. Because coming out of last year was horrible. I'm not going to lie. It really was a really bad time coming out at the end of October, going into November. Every single venue on the peninsula was just grabbing every single person they could. And we did our best during the lockdowns to hold on to as much as we could staff-wise. And we tried to keep things really interesting with what we did during lockdowns, etc. But, this year I feel as if, there's definitely a bit of optimism, and there's definitely, hopefully this summer will be the summer that we've been waiting for the last couple of years, to be honest, because no one's had a good one. That's for sure.
In the intro, I talked about, restaurants opening just before the pandemic, which yours did. And there's been restaurants opening during the pandemic and just before. Like, tell us about that period of time before the lockdowns when you were building the restaurant. How did you land on the site and choose the Mornington Peninsula for Wildgrain?
To be honest, we actually, all our businesses prior to this were in Sydney. And, me and my wife made a decision a good couple of years ago as, our youngest daughter was just about to start school, and we said, all right, do we actually want to live in Sydney or do we want to live somewhere else? So we actually came down to the Mornington Peninsula on holidays and just absolutely immediately fell in love with the place. Truly did. And said, no, that's it. And, Sydney was just going through a bit of a boom at the time, property-wise. So, it was time to sell the house, and we did. And in the meantime, we had just set up a couple of businesses in Sydney, so it was too young to sell those businesses. So I made the ridiculous thing of flying every week, which sounds crazy. It does sound crazy. But, I look back on it as a time in aviation where you could do that. I definitely couldn't do it right now. So I used to fly twice a week up and down to the Mornington Peninsula from Sydney. It did work, and I did that for about 6 years. And then, for various reasons, got to the end one Saturday night, I got home and I said to my wife, "Not white flag." So we said, "Right, that's it." And so I had a time to perfection. It was amazing, actually, when you think about how you could use flying as a mode of transport on a situation like that. It was it was finely tuned to the edge of its existence, to be honest. But and then COVID's come on and it's destroyed their industry as well, the aviation industry. I think it'll be a good couple of years before you could have anyone like me doing something like that again. But yeah, we sold the businesses in Sydney, and we found this site, and we were looking around for ages. Actually, there was a lot for sale, the usual situation, and came across this site, and it was huge, high ceilings, there's a big space, and went in and spoke to the guy, and I said to him, "Okay, this is an old building." I said, "So what was it?" And he said it was originally a grain store, and straight away I just went, "Done." That's it. The story is there, because for every time I would walk into a venue or whatever, whether it was to set up something, I would always say, "Okay, so what my dream and my everything is to be." That's one thing saying, but it's the venue that creates that, and it's actually not everything will work in every space. But as soon as myself and my wife we walked into Wildgrain, it was an old food store. We said, we could create something special here, and then just brainstorms from there on in, and my brother and his wife and everything were very much involved in a lot of the ideas, and and it just stemmed from there. An absolute just dream of creating a dining experience, which as soon as you walk in the door, you've got a positive vibe about it. I know, I don't want to go down into the feng shui side of things, but I do feel I can walk into a room and go, that there's something positive going on in here, and that's one of the things about creating Wildgrain. Definitely was a challenge. It's not for the faint-hearted. It's creating from an empty space, an empty shell, and I think we were very lucky. I mean, got to take that with a pinch of salt, and considering what we've been through for 2 years.
Take us back to the original concept. You've had so much upheaval in the last 2 years. I mean, 7 lockdowns is insane. But is the restaurant different to the concept and what you began with to what you have right now?
Oh, look, it certainly is. And I think it's if there's any positive we can take out of COVID, and I like to try and look at the positive as opposed to straight away the negative, there is the fact that you have to change direction when it's necessary, and just steering the ship straight forward all the way, just because that's the way it was done. I don't think that's something that even will remotely survive in the current market. So what we wanted to create was that all-day venue, that breakfast, lunch, and dinner situation, and we were very mindful of that when we were doing the design and when we were doing the thing. And I've always believed, because I've come from a fine dining background, and then I've opened and operated cafes, and they're two very different business models. They're incredibly different, and but the ethos in hospitality is the same, but the actual how you operate and how you treat the dining experience is very, very different. But so if you are we'll say a customer coming in at 7:30 in the morning for corporate area, you want your coffee, poached eggs, you want boom, 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 you want to be in and out in 15, 20 minutes. You could be the same person walking into that same venue at 7 o'clock at night. You're the same person, but a different customer. And, so that was very mindful in when we were doing the design. And, we didn't want customers walking in the morning feeling like they were just walking into a wine bar. And we didn't want to have customers walking in at night feeling like they were just walking into a cafe, which is, there's many restaurants who've tried to do breakfast and failed, and there's many cafes who've tried to do dinner and failed. And it's very obvious, and I think we all know venues that has done that, and it's not an easy transition, but I feel as if we as being very mindful of it going into it, we did create that. you know, when you think back on it, I mean, the volume of people that we had in the mornings was huge for the peninsula. It was massive. You know, Saturday morning, Sunday morning, you're in the hundreds for brunch, and it was one of the best on the whole peninsula. I'm not going to lie, but when you look back on it and you then try and you see, okay, how many staff did that take? Coming out of lockdown 7, we actually had to make that decision. Say we actually can't staff this. To do this properly, we actually can't staff it, because I think during all those lockdowns, your staff pool reduced. We were managed to hold on to enough of them during the first couple of lockdowns, but then after that, at the end, it was like, this is silly. This is just undoable. It's not tenable, and so we had to make that decision to go, instead of doing, the breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We said, all right, let's just do lunch and dinner, and we changed around a bit at the front of the restaurant and took away the espresso bar and the pastry section, and then just rejigged it a bit, and just focused on that. And even we had the idea of then maybe doing something on a Sunday. Let's do something really special on a Sunday brunch, because the market is there. There's no question about it. The market is there. But we tried our hardest just to recruit baristas, just to recruit workers to work on a Sunday morning. And it was just not there, and it's just one thing that we don't want to do is do something half-ass. And at the end of the day, if you're going to do it, you got to do it 100%. You got to commit to it and do it 100%, and then it'll work. But if you're going in half-ass with half a team and a half of this and half of that, it's going to be a failure, and that's not something we want to try and do here. So we got to look at the bigger picture. The restaurant's got to be here for a while, and so.
I want to explore what you're doing at Wildgrain in more detail a bit later on, but take us back to when you were young. What sort of role did food play in your family?
Look, I suppose it would be very easy for a chef to jump on the romantic notion that food was this and food was that, but you got to go back to where I grew up in very rural Ireland, medium family size of 6 kids in the house with 2 adults, 1 policeman's wage, and my dad, and it came down to economics. Let's not sugarcoat it. But one thing we definitely probably did a little bit differently than your normal Irish family growing up is, my dad's had a huge, what's the word? He was addicted to fly fishing. He was addicted to hunting and pheasant and duck and rabbits. And we just grew up with that. And we just thought it was normal. We thought everyone did that, on a Sunday. The big day of the year was the 1st of November when the pheasant season opened up. And my God, it was a huge thing. But I remember plucking pheasants every November as a child. It was just the way we did it. But everything was eaten. And that's the difference. And everything that we hunted and everything that we grew at home, it was typical Irish home with a front lawn at the front, and then out the back, it was like, no, you don't go out there, the visitors don't go out the back. That was, my dad had sheds everywhere. So from chickens to turkeys to there was an army of dogs. So, when the phrase goes, I got to see a man about a dog, it actually did happen in our house. It actually did happen. There was many trips to see a man about a dog. But it was, look, to be honest, Anthony, when I look back at it now, Mum would be breaking down whole wild salmon and making pâtés and going into our lunch boxes. That's a true story. And, you think back now, you can't buy that stuff anymore, and yet that was what we had. And we had pheasant sandwiches going to lunch. And I even actually, when I think in it, I just absolutely start laughing. But that was us. That's what we did. And every September, October, that's when the rabbits were gone, and we'd have the ferrets out and doing all of that. But and then because my dad came from a farming background, so there was a family farm, and my uncle used to operate it, and it was very tiny. It was tiny Irish farm. But my dad would have beef on there, and then we'd break down a whole beef at home, and that was how we ate. Actually, it was economically driven, but there was a pure lust and love of nature. and which is something I've really held on to, and I've never forgotten. It's when you tell that story to people who lived in cities or whatever, they just look at you like, are you for real? Yeah, and that's like, and I said, yes, that actually did happen. Yeah, it actually did happen. So we were definitely led by seasons, definitely led by the pheasant season and coming into winter, and then you'd have summertime was the wild salmon, the sea trout, the brown trout. It was like, Dad would be home every in the evenings, and there'd be bags of trout, and right, that's it. All of us would get the knives out and fillet them up and go from there. And it actually happened, but it's a very romantic memory. But it actually did happen, and that is definitely where my love for food came from. There's no question about it. And I still remember as a child baking cakes every Saturday with my mom, and the friends would be around. Oh, you make a great chef! You make a great chef! And I go, oh, okay, oh, okay, and I just went from there. And then obviously, I think. Driven, it's very hard to explain to a modern 18-year-old or modern 19-year-old these days, and even with my own kids, to the economic situation we face in Ireland when I was growing up. It was brutal. Like there was nothing sugarcoated about it. The country was broke to its tears. You had unemployment at 25%, like fact, and you try and put that into modern day terms now. It's a country which is bankrupt. So when you're in your year 10 or an equivalent of year 11, you're aiming to be looking at a job that actually can get you employed. So there's nothing like the modern day term. You can be whatever you want to be, my dear. But back then, you actually have to get a job that you will actually get a job in. And I was lucky in the fact that I actually really did enjoy food and restaurants and hospitality. I actually really had an absolute passion for it, and so it was easy for me. So it wasn't something I was forced into, but that's where I kind of started. That was the real seed, should we say, of where I started. And then I was lucky. I had a couple of steps. The people I met. And one of the main mentors I met was he owned a restaurant in Cork City, and it was I always felt it was ahead of its time, and at the time, and I worked for him for a good couple of years, and he was just an absolute amazing leader, should we say, in the direction that I took, and where I ended up working later on. And I was very fortunate, absolutely very fortunate to be working in a place like that.
Given the extraordinary sort of connection to food that you had from an early age, what was it like working in restaurants and commercial kitchens, having that understanding? Was it quite different, though, to what you had been used to at home?
Look, it was. I mean, you didn't probably appreciate it for what it was at the time. You were more driven as I saw what my parents went through trying to raise 6 kids on a single wage. I saw the economic situation in Ireland, and it just still resonates with me as to that was the fuel for the fire, really, should we say, that you actually wanted to succeed and wanted to do something well. So when I did go on into commercial kitchens, and I had a path. I had a clear direction I wanted to be and where I wanted to go, and no one's going to stop me. That was pretty much it. You know yourself, when you're in your early 20s, you're bulletproof, and you have the energy that you have, and I suppose as part of that energy has kind of continued all through my professional career, but it's definitely being in those professional kitchens, and especially the ones those high profile ones that I was in London, and what I was exposed to there, it was incredible, actually. Yeah, absolutely incredible.
Tell us a bit about sort of building your career. What's been the real sort of important venues and experiences that you've had? Yeah,
look, I think moving from Ireland to London, and it was the job that I had in Cork City with Michael Fleming, he was the one who helped me get the job in London. And you got to remember as well, I was probably only I think I was 19 or 20, and that was probably the second time I was on an airplane going to London. And you say that to someone now, and even I say to my own kids, and who've been on planes, whatever. But you say that to someone, that was the second time I was ever on an airplane, going from rural Ireland, going over to high society Mayfair and Belgravia and London. and you're in the trucks of where you are, it was definitely deer in the headlight stuff at the start. It was, you know, a whole side of society which I'd never been exposed to, never. Not coming from rural Ireland and going over to London and those restaurants that I worked in. You know, working at Mosselman's, which was amazing experience. It truly was. It was an eye-opening experience into what high society London was. You know, a lot of, you know, we you know, there was the restaurant at the Belfry, but also he had a catering arm to that business, and that was amazing. Like the stuff, Anthony, that we were doing back then, it was incredible, absolutely incredible, and the exposure that it was a whole new world. You know, you're cooking for the royal family. You know, next door is Lady Diana. You know, we're cooking for Prince Charles tonight. You know, all of that sort of situation. It was an exposure that, you know, you couldn't even. I'd be telling my friends back in Ireland, they just think I'm making the stories up. You know what I mean? You know, and I think my dad only took me serious once. I had to get this. I had to get the security card because we were going into Downing Street and we were cooking for Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton and that. And I still remember because my dad was a policeman and that was the only time he really took an interest in. Okay, so tell me about the security. And I was saying, well, the only way you could tell the difference between the British Secret Service and the American Secret Service was Ray-Bans and gum, and you know those guys do wear Ray-Bans and they do chew gum a lot. You know? But you know, to be involved in that situation, you know, it's definitely you know, it's something that I truly feel very privileged to have been in there and privileged to have been in those circles. But would I keep doing it forever? No, you can't. It's just something. You're lucky to be in that. You're in the right place at the right time. You're surrounded by really good professionals. You know, when I left Mosselman's and went to work with the Roux brothers at Locke Roche, that was a totally different environment again. And that was like when you say attention to detail, my oh my, that is attention to detail. And that's generally where I got it from. It was almost like, well, I won't say robotic because that definitely takes the romantic nature out of it, but it's definitely, you know, the intensity of it. I mean, you did 5 lunches, 5 dinners, and I could probably remember in one hand the amount of slow services we had. You were in the shit every day. You got into the kitchen at 5:45 in the morning, and you know, if I got home at 2 a.m. that night, I'm doing well. And that's kind of how the hours were at that restaurant. It was very intense, very. But again, the things I learned there. Would I keep doing it forever? No, you couldn't. You'd just burn out. But you know, the things that I learned there was I think it's definitely had a huge impact on my career, and it's had a huge impact on my philosophy on food. I think Michel Roux, his when I probably didn't appreciate it at the time because, you know, you're in that insane intensity of work. But when you think back, and I look back at it now as an operator and someone who owns a restaurant and what it takes, but also a lover of food, his ethos was seasons. There was no question about it. And, you know, it's one of the things that as I've gotten older and especially we operated different venues and different styles of venues and different things. You know, I do get, I won't say I get the shits, but I do get a bit negative as to why are we still importing asparagus from Mexico in winter in Australia? Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's really bad, you know? And, you know, why do we import bottles of water from France, and why do we in glass, and why do we import, you know, we don't need to be doing this. And you know, one of the things, you know, if you think, but if you pull the layers back a bit, and especially it's one thing we've learned at Wildgrain and then in the last 6 months, especially with regards to how things have absolutely exploded in cost, you have to react quicker. Like, you can't just wear it anymore. You can't wear the fact that green beans are $45 a kilo. You can't wear that anymore. Like, there's a reason in France those kind of things are not on the menu at that time of the year. And if you think back in it in the olden days, with the way people would operate menus and whatever, it would basically, as soon as the seasons come in, there's an abundance of beautiful food because it's in season, because it tastes really good, and because it's cheap. And you can actually afford to put it on the menu. But when you're paying $120 for Mexican asparagus in the middle of winter in Australia, you've really got to question, why as a society and why as a restaurant industry, why are we allowing that to happen? So... But like I said, my London time it's definitely etched in my memory as very positive. Huge amount of work, like insane work when you think about it. But you meet people and you're very fortunate to be surrounded by like-minded people. And it's, hospitality is a very intense industry, and it's not for everyone. That doesn't make them bad people. Some people who come, I can just go work in a restaurant. How hard can it be? It actually is hard, and you have to be a certain type of person. Not everyone can be a doctor. Not everyone can fly a plane. It's very different. And I do believe that with hospitality as well, but unfortunately in Australia, our pool of resources and staff is just diminishing. It almost feels like it's a river that's being dried up at the moment. And I'm hoping something will come in the next year, but at the moment it's just about getting through summer, to be honest, with everyone, I think, in the industry. It really is.
How did you end up in Australia?
Oh, look, when I was working in London, there was a job offer came on in what was the catering magazine there, and it was the casino in Sydney, the Star Casino. I mean, that's back in 97, I think. Yeah, 97. And, they recognized back then that, there was even a skill shortage when it comes to restaurants and chefs and everything. And they did a recruitment drive in London. And, I just applied for the job and got the job, and they flew me down here, gave me a couple of year visa, and went from there. And it was. I always wanted to come here. I'd worked with quite a few Australians in London, and obviously coming from Ireland and then going into London and then meeting all these international, should we say, because you don't meet very many international people in Ireland back then, anyway. It was just like a wealth of knowledge that was opened up to me, and a wealth of experience which was opened up. And I goes, I want to go to Australia, and just applied for this job, and it all came through, thank goodness. And haven't looked back since, to be honest. So
you mentioned you sold some businesses with the whole move to the Mornington Peninsula. Tell us about creating your own venues and what you created.
Everything that I suppose our ethos was always something, I'd walk into a venue and feel, okay, what can we create here? And what will this venue actually dictate, and what's needed, should we say, in the area? So when, we did quite well in multiple places in Sydney, which was really good. And then when we came down to Mornington Peninsula, it was like, finding this venue was like I said earlier, it was just about walking into the space and going, this is what this needs. This is it. And just went from there. So even when it comes from the high ceilings, the energy, the plants, the natural, everything about it, it's as soon as you walk in that door, we felt like that. These plants now, everyone does plants in restaurants, and some of them there's nothing worse than walking into a restaurant or a cafe and you see half dead plants everywhere, and it's like, oh man, what are you doing? But we felt like, no, these plants in our restaurant, they need to be as important as a piece of furniture, and they were, and they have, and that's what everyone comments on actually when they do walk in here. Are they real? I said, no, yes, they are real. Yeah.
The Mornington Peninsula is very different to Sydney. What's it been like creating a venue there, and how different is it compared to venues you've had in the past?
Look, I think one of the big challenges we had when we were creating Wildgrain was the fact that it was obviously it's a big venue, but it's also the fact that the council and everything was arduous. I'm not going to lie. It was and everything that we've ever sort of set up in the past were closed businesses. There was a failed Thai restaurant or something. We turned it into something amazing, or into a beautiful cafe, or there was something, the structure was already there. The infrastructure was there. So the toilets were there, or there was already an extraction. And you'd look for these spaces that had that, and then you kind of go, yeah, we can do this here. With this one, it was pretty much a total, bringing it all back to the four walls. The ceiling and the roof, and that was on the floor. And the floor is 100 years old, and you're kind of going, oof, do you know what I mean? But with this one, creating it from that sort of a really low grade seed into something which it is now, it looks amazing now, but to get there was huge. It was a massive undertaking, and from a cost perspective, but also from an energy perspective and a mindset as to, why does it take so long for an application to go through council, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And it's something which really, I was going like, do these guys not realize that time is money? And when it comes to commercial property, it should be handled slightly different. But anyway, we got there in the end. But it was definitely hurdles which we hadn't foreseen or which we hadn't had experience before either as well. Not to that level. I came pretty close a few times, and it was like, wow, this is extreme. And yet, do you not see the positive that this venue will bring to the area? And that sort of thing gets in the way sometimes. You get all a bit emotional, which is when it comes to, especially when it comes to councils, you can't. But also when it comes to, you got to really try and remove the emotion, but you can't because it's pure emotion that's driving you. It's pure emotion that's driving you to actually create this venue. From everything, the kitchen bench was a whole, platter of, forms, forms and pictures and things that we wanted to try and do, menu ideas. It was crazy. It was insane. It was a crazy time, I think. But like I said earlier, if we were to do that right now, with the experience we have, we'd probably be a little bit more experienced at it. But as like I said, as we're mom and dad operators, we're not like the Maryvale group. We're not like the big group. We're not. Those guys have huge resources. They've got huge resources of, designers, everything. They've got legal people who can actually deal with all the legal stuff. We were learning as we went, and you try and be as professional as you can. But sometimes when it comes down to the brass tacks of things and the money it's costing. And, nowadays, the way the rules have changed, and, don't start me on toilets. Oh, my God.
Well, give us a sense of, your food and, it's underpinned by the seasons. Is there a dish or two on the menu that sort of exemplifies the Wildgrain offering?
Look, I think everyone, when we were opening, what kind of food are you doing? What kind of food are you doing? And I never wanted to be the one that say, oh, we're doing modern Australia, because I don't like that kind of monk here. But at the end of the day, we're not just doing Italian. We're not just doing Greek, or we're not, and I would say to them, we're doing nice food, because at the end of the day, for me as an operator, what I would like to be able to put to the thing is not just about the food, but the food is very important, but it's also about the venue and it's also about the service. Each one of those three items are critical. But with regards to the food, we work really well with Leo. Leo Howard's our head chef, and he's definitely from the same kind of schooling as I'm from, and my wife Sarah is from. When it comes to that quality of food, and when it comes to that, and we work really well with him, and he has evolved, and we've evolved, and the restaurant has evolved from, we'll say, where we were a year ago to where we are now. And I think an awful lot of is that driven is coming from, okay, yes, you've got real basic good quality skills as a chef and myself as whatever, but when it comes to what the customer wants, you've really got to have meat in the middle. It can't be just about a chef coming up with, this is my dream and my passion, and this is how I philosophize about food. That sounds great on Instagram, but and it's not disrespect to some chefs, but at the end of the day, it's when it's a business, you've got to look at where you are and what you're doing. We are where we are in Mornington. We don't have that beautiful winery vista that some of the wineries have. And, at the end of the day, so it was so important when we did create the restaurant is that as soon as that customer walks in that door, there has to be a wow factor. There has to be the four walls within have to be an eye-popping situation. And it has, and it's created that. But also the food has to back it up. And working with Leo, like he's been an amazing asset to the business. He really has. He's got an amazing skill level, and his talent and his quest for food and wanting to create that beautiful dish it works. It really does. It's a really great relationship that we have. But also it's coming down to the staff on the floor and all that sort of thing. And the food is it's obviously it's incredibly important. But like I said, it's one element to the success of the business, to be honest. Yeah.
The failure rates of new hospitality businesses in the first 2 years are incredibly high, let alone something like a pandemic coming in. What do you think the secret to sort of you surviving and also prospering through such a challenging period for a new business?
A friend of mine once asked me, a good couple of years ago, what does it take to run a good business and stay in the business that you've run for so long, so well? And I said, endurance and energy. And it's one of the things that's probably one of the only things I could probably say, I bring that to the table. But it's a case of it's what kept us going through lockdown. We had invested so much in the restaurant, and like I said, going through with the councils and then finally opening up, we had probably 6 weeks of trading, and then COVID hit. So you're basically just getting your feet on the rungs of the ladder, and then basically boom. But at the end of the day, the reason there's a failure rate for so many of the restaurants and so many, whether it's restaurants, bars, cafes, whatever, it is that those first couple of months are so important because the money you outlay is off the charts. It's incredible amount of money. And one of the things, and it's probably something that's really stuck in my mind in regards to all the lockdowns we had to endure, you lose money when you open up because you're the opening stock, all of that, then you're operating and then you're back into lockdown again. So you're losing money in all that stock. Let's just talk about food. And then you're back up operating again. So you've got to invest again in more stock, and then you're back down again. So you're losing money. Every single time you open and close, you're losing money. And at the end, when we got to lockdown 7, it was like, we're just about getting through here. Like, I'm not going to lie, it was pure energy. We came up with some great ideas just to keep things going during those lockdowns. But when we got out of lockdown 7, I'll be honest, that's probably the worst time, I feel anyway, that I felt about the whole thing, was because it was such a turkey shoot for staff. It was an absolute awful time trying to recruit people, and what you did have to pay for staff and what you did have to pay to recruiters and all of that kind of thing. It was just a horrible time, and it's probably going to be etched in my memory forever, actually, that whole October, November, January period. And then Omicron turned around and raised its head in January, and that was brutal, actually. And then you'd have the kitchen get taken out, and it was not a nice time. Really, really not a nice time. But I feel as if, we've kind of turned the corner. I feel Australia as a society has probably turned the corner when it comes to this sort of thing. And I'm just hoping from here on in now it's growth, because the industry needs growth. I think it's definitely changing. I am fearful for what's coming when it comes to, the economic viability of what restaurants can absolutely operate now. I think you got to remember what things were done pre-COVID to how they're operating now. I think it's going to be a huge change in the landscape. I think it is. I think the labour cost that it takes now to go in for a seated service for a cappuccino and a brownie and everything, I think that those days are numbered, really are. I mean, you just have to look at the streetscape of Melbourne. And you walk around 9 o'clock in Melbourne now and see where you can get poached eggs and avocado. It's quite a limited affair, which is sad to see, because that's just the consequence of the economic side of things. You look at things that we've had to endure in the last, we'll say, just the increases in the last 2 months with gas and electricity and everything. It's all over the news and everything. But the impact on restaurants, because we use a fair bit of gas, we use a fair bit of electricity, and when your monthly bill doubles from 3,000 to 6,000, you kind of go, all right, where's that going to come from? So.
Well, you're doing extraordinary things in Mornington Peninsula, and things are looking positive as we move towards summer. What do you love about what you do?
Do you know, my vice, if we call it that, is making people happy and making customers walking in, seeing the restaurant full, and you're having customers walk out that door and they've got nothing but positive to say. Don't get me wrong, you got your odd negative Nancy, and you got your odd person who will say something like, all right, what side of the world did that come from? But at the end of the day, you got to look at it as a whole and the positivity, and it's what makes us do what we do. I've cancelled my order for my Aston Martin this year, Anthony, just so you know. So there's I've cancelled that. So it's not because I'm not doing hospitality because I get a new Aston Martin every year. That doesn't happen in reality. why we do it is you have to have that underlying nature to make people happy and enjoy making people happy. It's like when you go to a table and you get just smiles at a table, that's why we do it. And that's the important thing. And that's the energy that, that Wildgrain hopefully gives off when people walk in and when they leave. And it's the important thing. It's what creates the longevity of a restaurant. It is that energy, and it is that positive energy that when people sit down, they know they're going to get good service. They're now going to get really good quality food. And the dining experience as a whole is a really good one, because I think with what's coming when it comes to people's choices and people, cost of living, et cetera, people are going to be a little bit more critical. Well, I won't say critical, but also they'll be a little bit more reserved as to where they go and where they choose to go and how often they will choose to go. So when they do want to go out, yes, they will have a nice bottle of wine, but they want to make sure that entire dining experience is a positive one. I feel like our industry is changing. It is going to change quite dramatically, actually, in the next year. And it's just it's pure economics. Let's not sugarcoat it. It's, the cost of labor, the cost of everything, the cost of goods, the cost of operating. What used to be the business model of you must have your doors open, you must be open, you must be this and you must be that. Small is the new big. That's what I keep saying to the guys at work. Small is the new big, because the cost of opening those doors are now at a point where you need to be really busy for those times that the doors are open. Even from a heating perspective, you want to heat the restaurant? Yes, you don't want to walk into a cold restaurant, but you need to walk into that restaurant when it's full. And that's when the heating is on. And that's really micro stuff, but it does come down to the operational side of a restaurant. It really does,
Well, Sean, it's been amazing having you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear just a bit of your story. Good luck this summer down in the Mornington Peninsula. Please keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks, Anthony. Really great to have me. Thank you so much. Really good. Thank you.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.